a mid-tier Australian law firm, tell us a little bit about Gadens' own journey to establishing a footprint in Asia.
It was a long journey. Gadens is an old law firm. It's been around for about 80 odd years. It made quite a pioneering venture into PNG around about 40 odd years ago, but the move to Asia has taken quite a lot longer. It's really started, I suppose, when we got our licence more than 3 years ago. So I opened the office 3 years ago for Gadens on the basis of sort of growing it to an Asia-wide practice, so based in Singapore, and that was not an accidental decision. It was a thoroughly thought-out decision. Singapore being the best base, I guess, for a growing law firm, with access to Asia and all the other sort of attractions that Singapore has, and an easy place to live and work. So we started the journey 3 years ago. We've grown. We've had 3 very good years. There's some interesting times ahead as legal practices change and there's more of a bent towards globalisation for law firms. But it's been a good journey.
Will there be plans in the future for further expansion out of Singapore, using it as a launching pad?
There will be. Our original sort of plans were exactly that, get our foundation built financially and sort of personnel-wise in Singapore, and then look to more sensible organic growth in the region. We're a little bit different in a lot of ways to other sort of professional service providers. We don't need an office in each jurisdiction, although we operate sort of on a global basis or anywhere in Asia, so we can use partners for that. But I think we would have a move towards more of the growing markets. We have a big interest. I sit on the board of the Australian-Myanmar Chamber of Commerce, so Myanmar is always an option for us, as is Indonesia. Gadens is going through a transformation process at the moment in terms of globalisation, so how that story will sort of pan out, I'm not sure at the moment.
And we're here as part of Gemstar Technologies' Singapore trade mission. So what brought you to become a partner with Gemstar?
I've known Gemma for a long time. She's a very impressive businesswoman. It's like I've said in the past, she sort of wears me out every time she sort of comes up here. She's got so much energy and enthusiasm. And the idea sort of resonated in a couple of ways. One, because she already has a successful business, so she's proved herself as a businesswoman, even though she's bringing up 2 small children, which is probably a difficult thing to do these days. But also on the technology sort of basis, I did a couple of years as an in-house lawyer with CSIRO, which was a good background for technology. And on the corporate commercial side of technology, we've done a bit of work for clients in Asia before. We've seen it as one of our growth areas. Also being an Australian law firm and an Australian lawyer, helping Australian firms grow into Asia has always been of an interest. And even on a couple of levels, it's been kind of frustrating seeing some Australian firms try and get into Asia for the wrong reasons, or doing it on the wrong platform, or without any support. And that takes a very negative message back, which is kind of a wrong message. Those that have done it successfully, like the likes of ANZ and people like that, have done it strategically with partners and in a measured sort of a way. So the Gemstar platform is quite important for Australian tech companies because it gives them that pathway. It gives them a foundation. So it makes it a lot easier to start off, to find the right partners, and also to sort of find the right advice.
How would you describe the technology sector in the Singapore region and I guess Southeast Asia as well?
It's interesting. It's you look at it from a personal perspective. I have 2 children and they have technological everything and they have their faces buried in technology most days. I lived in Vietnam for a while, more than sort of in the 2007, 2008, more than a few years ago. And at that stage, your average person had 2 mobile phones. So technology is sort of permeated even in sort of emerging markets. But in Singapore, the government's made a conscious effort to grow technology here. It gives incentives and grants for innovation, for R&D and various other things. It's trying to grow a technology hub. And having lived in Singapore for 10 years, when the government sets out to do something, it will do it.
What should Australian businesses be aware of when considering entering Asian markets?
I think there's a few things that they need to consider. Primarily, the move should be strategic. Pick a foundation country like Singapore. Singapore is a very easy place to start. You can set up a company in 24 hours. There's a lot of tax incentives. There's a lot of support. And it's to coin a phrase, it's Asia 101. So having staff move here, it's a lot less traumatic, if you like, than sticking them somewhere sort of in the outback of Indonesia or something like that, where it's a lot more difficult. But there are several things that they need to consider other than that. One is picking a base for innovation, the country that's going to support innovation. Singapore does that quite well. Looking at barriers to investment. What are the barriers? Can I repatriate my profits back home? Is there any tax disadvantages to setting up shop somewhere in Asia? You need to partner locally. That can be done safely if you do it properly, but if you do it incorrectly, it can also ruin your business. In the tech space, IP is very important, protecting your IP rights. So being able to not only protect but also enforce the rights that you have is very important. That can present difficulties in certain parts of Asia, but the perception that Asia is still behind the rest of the world I think is incorrect. I've heard that from a few businesses. Asia is the economic powerhouse, the future economic powerhouse of the world, I think, and in terms of technology, it has a better grasp. For example, Myanmar, their telephone network will jump straight to 4G. They won't pass through the old phones that we used to have and 2G, 3G, it'll just be a 4G network. So they'll be that much further along in their sort of technology and industrial sort of evolution.
What would you identify as being the future growth markets in Asia? What do you think the next big business boom perhaps will be?
In terms of markets, for us there's a large focus on emerging markets. I've mentioned a couple already, Myanmar, there's Vietnam, there's Indonesia. These are all growing markets. They're emerging markets. They have a large population, and they'll have the consumer base eventually that'll drive sort of technological advancement. Also see ASEAN, the new economic cooperative, as it'll be a large sort of a growth area in Asia for business. When you start hooking up economies like Singapore and Indonesia and places like that, and the Philippines together in a cooperative, in a single economy, then that's going to be very, very strong.
As an Australian business leader in Asia with a strong appreciation for the region, what would you like to see more of when it comes to the relationship between Australia and Asia, looking at Singapore in particular?
In terms of the relationship with Australia and Asia, and what I think needs to happen is there needs to be more of a connection, more of a marketing approach. Australia's got a very good innovation program at the moment. That should extend past just Australia. It should be encouraging technology businesses to expand into Asia, to tap into Asian markets. The High Commissioner in Singapore has done a marvellous job in the last couple of years, driving a project that will link Singapore and Australia quite well in terms of standards and various other sectors. I think that can be expanded in the technology space. A little bit more partnering, I think, would go down really well. But not just in Singapore, in some other markets as well, it could work. We have a very strong relationship with Indonesia, for example, in the food and beverage space. There's no reason why that can't apply to technology as well.